So prior to the MK party coming onto the scene, I was convinced that the ANC would get 45 to 50%, get the small parties over to 50%, and rule the country. With Zuma on the scene, they're looking at 40%, maybe even lower, 38%. So the ANC will need a coalition to govern. And it's got a choice: get eaten up by the hard left or have a cooperation with the moderate right. That's the choice.
Yeah, I'm less convinced, and I'll explain why. And the first is, you must understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the ANC is not a static organization. If you have the ANC of Thabo Mbeki, this is drastically different from an ANC of Jacob Zuma, which is drastically different from a ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa. The Cyril Ramaphosa ANC that we have seen in the time that he's been in power, this is a socialist ANC, right? I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa very famously said, "I'm a socialist." You know, when somebody tells you who they are, you should probably believe it. The problem is that socialist bend of the ANC means that their desire is to centralize everything into government hands. And to a degree, that's not really what a lot of the other opposition parties want. Well, obviously, excluding the EFF, and that's just because they're just the ANC's little brother.
Yeah, but remember what I said. Cyril needs a government of national unity. Cyril himself. The guy didn't have a legacy whatsoever, right? He's been diddling for the past, I don't know how long he's been in power, 5-6 years, you would never know. Nothing to show for it other than a slight down, more unemployment, more potholes, more fuck-ups, more load shedding. This is Cyril's legacy. Yes, he's got 5 billion rand in the bank. He can go away and, do what he wants in Ibiza with the working girls there. But for Cyril to survive, if he has any chance to survive after this election with 38% of the vote, EFF and MK will do everything in their power to take him out. Absolutely everything. The DA, the IFP, the Freedom Front Plus, to me, would rather work with Cyril than someone like Paul Mashatile, who is hell-bent on the ANC-EFF partnership at all costs. And by the way, the DA right now is going after Paul Mashatile based on those news articles that he is a corrupt bastard, like everyone else in the ANC. But if Cyril wants to survive politically and have any sort of legacy, he has to form a government of national unity without the EFF and without the MK. It's the only solution I can find.
It may be the only solution that you can find, but there is fundamental questions that must be answered before we can actually take that as a solution that's credible. Number one is, does Cyril actually want to survive? Does he even want another 5 years in office? Let us not forget that Cyril Ramaphosa actually resigned from office and was convinced to stay on. He's arguably been noticeably absent since he was convinced to stay on, which is part of the reason that the economy is like a ship without a captain, because the captain resigned. So does he actually want to stay on for another term? That's a core fundamental point. The second fundamental point is, if the ANC does stay on, you cannot divorce Cyril Ramaphosa from the ANC. Let us not forget this as a president who said, "I'd rather be seen as a weak president than as a president who divided the ANC." And so far, well, he's both a weak president and a guy who divided the ANC. But with that being said, the reality of the situation is that if key components of the ANC are redirected by Cyril as the head to the DA, or even the Freedom Front Plus, who would split it from certain alliance partners, such as the trade unions and the Communist Party. So it would, in effect, split the ANC. Would it save Cyril Ramaphosa's reputation or legacy? Yeah, most definitely. But does he care about his legacy? Let us remind ourselves. He said he don't care about himself. He cares about the legacy of the ANC. So, 2 questions. Does he even want to stay on? Does he even want a legacy? Or is he protecting the ANC at all costs? Because let us not forget, that's what he says he's doing.
I don't have the answer to those questions, but here's a counterfactual. Let's say he goes with the ANC and the EFF. And MK, sorry. What is MK and the EFF going to do to the ANC? These are wild dogs cooperating with a wounded buffalo. They're going to eat it alive. There will be nothing left of the ANC. It's going to be so cannibalized that you won't even find the bones. of this particular organization, because that's what the EFF wants. That's what MK wants as well. It's their reason for existing. So by going into coalition with them, you signed your own death warrant. You've made a deal with the wolf that's going to eat all the sheep. If you go into an alliance or understanding or whatever you want to call it with the government of national unity, they will still see you as the ANC, as a distinct political party with distinct people and distinct ideas. The other two will not. And that's what I'm counting on.
And I'm counting on Morning Shot's razor. And Morning Shot's razor dictates that the most retarded explanation or outcome of any decision is the most likely one. And the most retarded decision would be to partner with the ANC and the EFF. Because you are 100% correct, they will be cannibalized from the top down. Let us not forget that Juju himself says, why does he prefer Paul Mashatile as the head of the ANC? And he said on camera, it's because Paul, in his words, is a weak idiot. And because he's a weak idiot, he's easy to control. Whereas in his words, Ramaphosa isn't, because Ramaphosa is arguably the biggest ideologue the ANC actually has. That's the reason we find ourselves in this mess. When it comes through to MK, there's no doubt that there is bad blood between Cyril Ramaphosa and Jacob Zuma. It should be obvious to everybody. Obviously, let us not forget that Jacob Zuma, blames Cyril Ramaphosa for effectively ousting what Jacob Zuma considers to be the black excellence, also known as the corrupt. And he says that Cyril Ramaphosa has deliberately gone after the Jacob Zuma corrupt because they were Jacob Zuma allies, whilst leaving the Cyril Ramaphosa corrupt in place. You know, like the Speaker of Parliament, you know, the minister that was the defense minister. We covered that in a video a few days ago. So how do you get two parties, the EFF, which is, remember, set up as the counterparty to Jacob Zuma, and it was set up because Cyril Ramaphosa fired Julius Malema. He was the one who was responsible for kicking him out the party. He says it was at the whim of Jacob Zuma, but he's the one who actually did it. And the MK party that hates Cyril Ramaphosa to work with the ANC. And the answer, Ramon, is very easy. And that is, you have to remove Cyril Ramaphosa, right? Cyril cannot, as a figurehead of the ANC, work with these two parties because neither party like him. With that being said, if Paul Mashatile is the replacement, Paul Mashatile is nowhere near the personality of a Jacob Zuma or a Julius Malema. He does not stand a chance. So how do you have him as the president with two personalities that are bigger personalities than he himself? Because Paul Mashatile does not have a public personality.
Exactly. You've seen the man speak. Like, he talks about nonsense, and he looks like a little gnome, a little dark elf. Dark as in evil, not black. But anyway, yeah. I mean, Paul Mashatile has no personality whatsoever. He has no constituency. He has very little going for him, I'm afraid to say. And he's going to be eaten apart by Zuma and Malema. And who will be there to help him? Fikile and Balula? I mean, come on. Let's be serious here. Let's be serious. If you go into a room with John Steenhuisen, Herman Shaba, the guy from IFP, I don't know his name, and Groenewald from Free From Plus, and you tell them, I'm the ANC, let's make a deal. They'll be like, cool, the ANC exists, Cyril exists, we will respect him, let's make a deal. If you go into a room with Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma and say, here, I'm the ANC, let's make a deal, they're going to be like, cool, let's lick our lips and let's start just biting you, because that's all we want to do. One is hell-bent on destroying you, the other wants to govern, and you're a key part of making sure that happens. Seems like a no-brainer to me, but Morning Shot Razor does apply.
Morning Shot Razor does apply. And you know, we didn't actually have this problem when we had David Mabuza, because David Mabuza actually had a personality and was a very strong-willed individual. But, you know, people who are close to Paul Mashatile do say he's a very strong-willed individual with his own ideology, and he could be very good as a president, but he's unfortunately malleable. He's pliable. He can be molded to whoever basically is around him. Which I don't know how you use the words of, this is a strong-willed individual with his own ideology that can be shaped by whatever I tell him to do. They're not mutual. That's not the same thing. They're not mutually exclusive. So that does imply that maybe people want to be nice about him, but actually he could really be manipulated by whomsoever's closest around you. But the fact of the matter, Ramon, is you cannot shift or change the mindset of a Julius Malema or a Jacob Zuma. These guys are not applicable. They are hard rocks. So what happens when you throw a piece of paper at a rock? The paper molds to the shape of the rock. The rock doesn't move because of the piece of paper. And unfortunately, in this instance, Paul Mashatile does appear to be the piece of paper, right? Getting thrown at the rock of Jacob Zuma and Julius Malema. So would that ultimately save the ANC? Or would it result in the ANC's demise?
One last thing before we end. The Oppenheimers fund like everyone except the EFF and MK. And we know for a fact the Oppenheimers helped Cyril become, the multi-billionaire that he is today. So maybe there's a plan of the funders of political parties who have funded the DA and Rise Mzansi and Action SA. Not to show about IFP, but I don't think so. But anyway, Oppenheimers have helped Cyril. Oppenheimers have funded a lot of the opposition political parties. Is there, congregation of Oppenheimer funding coming together in 2024 post-election? That could be another little conspiracy theory to go down to.
Could be, but let us not forget that key individuals within the ANC have been questioned about the possibility of a coalition with the DA. And many of them have said the exact things that we've just spent 11 minutes talking about. That, they're ideological opponents, blah, blah, blah. And the answer given by very senior individuals within the ANC are, all of that is bullshit, because they've been working with the DA for the last 30 years. They've been working with the DA in coalition to a degree, because they're both in parliament. They both sit there on opposition benches. They are opponents in every single municipality in the country. It's not like they don't have experience of working with the DA. Of course they do. And in many instances, politics do require compromise between two parties, which is why, to a large degree, the two opposition parties, sometimes it's very difficult to tell the ideological bend and the differences between the two. As let us not forget that the DA of Musi Maimane was commonly referred to as ANC Light. Well, there's a reason for that, because Musi was in parliament with the ANC for how long? So that itself shows, and the ANC have explained, were those two to find themselves in coalition governments in various parts of the country, it wouldn't be that dissimilar from what it is at the moment. They are perfectly capable and willing to set their differences aside in order to work together, because according to them, they already do.